Welcome everybody to today's event. We have over 600 participants joining thus far, which is truly thrilling. By way of introduction, my name is Noah Schlesinger. I'm a member of the board of directors at the Vilna. My family originated from Vilnius, so I'm thrilled to be introducing today's event. First of all, I'd like to thank our fiscal sponsors, Old Dominion University's Institute for Jewish Studies and Interfaith Understanding, United Jewish Community of the Virginia Peninsula, Virginia Holocaust Museum in Richmond, Virginia, Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. Built in 1919 by immigrants from Vilnius, the Vilna is the only Jewish historic landmark still remaining in downtown Boston. Our recent $4 million renovation, displayed in the video you just saw, honors the historic nature of the building while propelling the Vilna into the 21st century, allowing us to serve our community in exciting, expanded ways. We look forward to hearing from today's speakers about their own endeavors to uncover the lost secrets of Lithuanian Jews. The Vilna congregation, which began in 1893, was a shul, a spiritual place of worship, but it was also the center for Jewish life and tangible support to these Jewish immigrants of Boston. Now, over 100 years later, think of us as a JCC or 92nd Street Y on Beacon Hill, a central hub of activity, all the while brimming with history. The way today will work: Richard Freu will contextualize the film and project, and then we will watch the short trailer. The panelists will each then speak for a few minutes, and we will leave the last 25 to 30 minutes for audience Q&A. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box. I see we also have a lot of live chatters already, so please continue not to be shy. If you didn't already watch the film, a link was included in your confirmation. I would highly recommend watching it. It's truly fascinating. It was in the reminder email as well. It will only be available for the next 48 hours, so make sure you watch it soon after this if you haven't already. Now to welcome our phenomenal panelists today. Our good friend, Dr. Richard Freund, is the Bertram and Gladys Aaron Professor of Jewish Studies at Christopher Newport University. He has directed over a dozen archaeological projects in Israel, including sites associated with the beginnings of Christianity and Judaism at Nazareth, Bethsaida, and Qumran, the site of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. In addition, he has directed projects in Spain, Poland, Rhodes, Greece, and Lithuania. His work has been featured in the New York Times, Time Magazine, Newsweek, Archaeology, Smithsonian Magazine, and featured on the BBC, MSNBC, CNN, NPR, and Fox News, and in hundreds of media outlets worldwide. His work is featured in 20 television documentaries from National Geographic, CNN, Discovery, History Channel, and PBS. The Vilna was honored to present his prior film, Holocaust Escape Tunnels. Dr. Jon Seligman is the director of the Excavation, Surveys, and Research Department of the Israel Antiquities Authority. His previous positions include 12 years as the Jerusalem Regional Archaeologist and 6 as a research archaeologist. Dr. Seligman studied at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and University College of London, receiving his doctorate summa cum laude from Haifa University on the subject of the rural hinterland of Jerusalem during the Byzantine period. Jon has directed some 30 excavations in Jerusalem, Bet Shean, and in the Carmel Mountains, and has published widely, including 3 books and numerous chapters and articles in reference books, journals, and other publications. He also participated in the planning team for the master plan for the city and Old City of Jerusalem. Jon is a Litvak, with his family also originating from the area of Vilnius. Loic Salfati was born in France and is a photographer and lighting engineer. He was in charge of the lighting at Disneyland Paris, and in 2002 moved to Lithuania. He served as the director of cultural projects at the French Institute in Vilnius, and now serves as the deputy director. He started this documentary about the Great Synagogue in 2018. Harry Joel earned his BSc and MSc from Simon Fraser University and a PhD from the University of Calgary. After 2 postdoctoral fellowships, he accepted a position at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, where he is presently a professor in the Department of Geography and Anthropology. Harry has a broad background in the earth sciences, particularly geomorphology, stratigraphy, and geoarchaeology. His collaborative research, which includes undergraduate students, has resulted in numerous publications, conference presentations, and 3 edited volumes. This is quite a panel, as I said. And finally, last but not least, Dr. Phil Reeder is currently the Dean of the Byers School of Natural and Environmental Sciences at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His current areas of research broadly focus on using science to write or rewrite history. He has been doing Holocaust-related research as part of an international team of scientists, archaeologists, and historians for the past 10 years, mostly in Lithuania and Poland. As chief cartographer, he is responsible for all aspects of mapping and spatial analysis associated with these projects. And now, without further ado, Richard, over to you.
Okay, well, shalom aleichem to everybody. Good afternoon. You think you're coming to see something about a film. And what we're going to really do today is celebrate the 300th birthday of the Vilna Gaon. So for those of you who don't know who the Vilna Gaon is, I will tell you that if you watch the movie and you finish the movie, at the end of the movie that you got in the link, there is a 14-minute, very moving tribute to the Vilna Gaon. I call the Vilna Gaon the man who built the Great Synagogue in Loic. Not that he physically built it, but his reputation and the ideas of the Vilna Gaon really stand as a great testament to Litvak Jewry. And for us that are Litvaks, this is a great opportunity for us to celebrate him. Lithuania has declared 2020 as the year of the Gaon. And even though we're in a pandemic, this is an opportunity for us to celebrate the Gaon. So I'm glad you're all here to see that. More important, and this is really one of the reasons why we decided to do this. This is an opportunity for us to teach a little bit about the geoscience that did not get into this version of the film. So what you're going to be watching today does not include all the aspects of the geoscience and archaeology that hopefully will appear in the much longer film that will be finished in 2021. And more importantly, that will be premiered, hopefully, face-to-face with real people in real theaters and on TV. But you'll hear more about that from Loic. So look at this as if it's a Vorspeisen or hors d'oeuvres before we start the main course. And we're also going to be talking at the end about where we're going from this 2021 and what is the next step with these excavations. But the thank yous start today. So many of us don't know that our universities, students, foundations, and individual donors have made it possible for us to do this project over a long period of time. We want to thank the Jewish community of Lithuania, especially the Goodwill Fund, and the mayors, the political figures in Vilnius and Kaunas, and in the Lithuanian government that have been very instrumental to our ability to do this project. I want to thank the Consul General of Lithuania in New York, who personally was very, very helpful during moments when we needed his help. We also have to thank the US Embassy in Lithuania, the Israeli Embassy in Lithuania, the US Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad, Targum Shlishi, the Vilna Gaon Jewish State Museum, Litvak World, Geoscientists Without Borders, the Israel Antiquities Authority, the Bertram and Gladys Aaron Professorship in Jewish Studies at Christopher Newport University, the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford, the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, Duquesne, and our partners, Chief Geophysicist Paul Baumann and Geophysicist Alistair McClyment, Colin Miazga, Chris Slater at Advision, and Worley Parsons in Calgary, Canada. And for those donations that come from those individuals who made this project possible. And the students who went out to the field, both Lithuanian, Israeli volunteers, Americans, Canadians who were out in the field with us and who actually did the work. So I want to thank them. And I also want to thank our leaders, our Lithuanian leaders, Zenonas Balbonis, Justinas Rasas, Mantas Dalbares, and our Israeli leader, Jon Seligman of the Israel Antiquities Authority, whose leadership has made this project so successful, and the ongoing scholarship of Dr. Vladimir Levin of Hebrew University, who continues to provide insights to our work on the art and architecture of the synagogues of Eastern Europe. One thing I'd like to take the moment to do is to have Jon Seligman, whose vision was able to start this whole project and of course succeed in so many different ways in a project that was so uncertain from the very beginning. So I'd like to ask Jon Seligman to join us to say a few words about the project itself.
Richard, it looks like we lost John, so hopefully he will come back on in a few minutes, and I think that we should continue on.
So let's see the video, which will at least introduce the project, and then maybe when the video is over, we'll get John back in.
If I was speaking to somebody secular in the modern world, I would say it was the central campus of prayer and study and spiritual activity for the Jews of Vilna and for visitors from all over the world.
And what is important, that the Great Synagogue never existed alone. It was a center of a complex which is called Synagogue Courtyard.
And the word in Yiddish that evolved over hundreds of years is Schulhof, the Synagogue Courtyard, der Schulhof.
This is a painting of the Synagogue Courtyard of the Great Synagogue.
It comes together, they're inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. It's not only the synagogue, it's the synagogue as part of the cultural Jewish center of the city.
And Vilnius is the Jerusalem of Lithuania. The Great Synagogue is the holy temple that was in ancient Jerusalem.
Les vieux juifs qui allaient prier dans les vestiges de la grande synagogue parce qu'elle était presque toute saine sauf surtout le toit était endommagé.
Bet rusai ją sugriovė. Ir kai sprogdino didžiąją sinagogą, aš atsimenu, mano mama verkė.
That's it! That's a continuation!
אוקיי, רק שנייה, זה הכל מתחבר עכשיו. וואי, 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 וואי.
For me, the synagogue, first of all, of course, clearly is this very magnificent hall, really large hall.
When you get to the interior and you realize there's so many things in life that the external doesn't necessarily represent the internal.
There was a rule that you couldn't build a synagogue any higher than the tallest church in town. So what did they do? Instead of building up, they decided to build down.
What we're trying to do with the ground penetrating radar is seeing where voids are in the subsurface.
And connected to the synagogue was the Strashroom Library. And we're sitting in the remnants of the Strashroom Library here.
when the decision was taken by the Soviet Union to destroy what was left of the Great Synagogue, and they capped it with a cement block and then built the elementary school on top, they ironically preserved for all time everything that was down below the surface. The Great Synagogue was hiding in plain sight for over 70 years.
So I'd like to call upon Jon Seligman to say a few words about the project itself, how it evolved, and his own view of things.
Yeah, first I hope you can hear me because we're in the middle of an electric storm which has taken out my internet. So we'll have to see what's going on. Can everybody hear me? I just hope everything's okay. Okay. First of all, that's a blessing because, the first rain in Israel of the year is always considered a very important event. We'd only have rains for a few months every year, and so the first rain is a big event, and everything has been shut down. Electricity's gone. Okay. I arrived at the project in 2013 on a sort of family roots visit, where I went to visit the various places our family had come from in the area around Vilna, in the various shtetl around Vilna where my grandparents had been born. And I chanced upon the area of the Great Synagogue and found an excavation being conducted at the site. Previously, about a year before that, with my background in archaeology in Israel, I immediately contacted the archaeologist who was involved in that very small excavation which took place in 2011. And I said, well, this will be a wonderful opportunity to do a joint project. It was a very brave thing to do because obviously I had no budget or anything to do such a project. And later on we met, I think it was in Nebraska, of all places, where we sort of initiated a project involving some of the ground penetrating radar together with Richard and Harry Joel and with Phil. And that was the very first work we did in the field in 2015. Later on, the project developed a little bit of life of its own, and we managed to gather in a little bit more funds and to start excavating at the site. And I think a few things should be said. The first thing is that is the symbolic aspect of the Great Synagogue. I don't think any of us, as a Jew living anywhere in the West, quite understands what a city like Vilna really was to the Jewish community in the 19th and the early 20th centuries. None of us live in cities, or have lived in cities anywhere in the diaspora where Jews make up 40% of the population. None of us have lived in cities where they're multicultural cities. Obviously, Vilnius as this day is not a multicultural city, it's an exclusively Lithuanian city. But in the past, this was a multicultural city, and the largest community in that multicultural city was the Jewish community. There were 160 synagogues in the city of Vilnius on the eve of the Second World War. And that means that the main synagogue, the Great Synagogue of Vilna, had more than a position as just the biggest synagogue in the city. This was a symbol. It was the symbol of the Jewish community, not only of Vilna, but also of Lithuanian Jewry. It was the most important edifice of the Litvak community and of the Jews of Vilna. So for them it was a symbol, you could say, I always call this the other cathedral of the city. This was the other cathedral of the city. In a city where 40% of the population is the Jewish population, then their most important symbol, their cathedral, is what symbolizes them. Just as the other cathedral, the Cathedral of St. Stanislas, symbolizes the Polish and the Lithuanian communities that lived in the city. So I think that's the way it's got to be viewed. That's the way it's got to be viewed. And that was understood not only by the Lithuanian population, Litvak Jews, it was also understood by the other people in the city. So for example, when the president arrives in what was then Vilna, he then visits the cathedral, And then he goes to visit the other cathedral. He goes to sit on the bima of the Great Synagogue, where he then presents then he then has a presentation to him from the Jewish community, the other important community of the city of Vilnius. So that's the way you really got to look at this building and the symbol of it. The other thing I think is worth noting is that my colleague, Dr. Vladimir Levin of the Hebrew University, always refers to these places as a town within a town. In other words, the Schulhof is a little, you could say, is a little microcosm of the city. It has aspects of the town hall. It has aspects of the cathedral. It has aspects of law and order. For example, there is a small prison inside the complex of the Great Synagogue. It has the places of learning, including the Strashroom Library. It has the little prayer halls. It has the bathhouse. It has the mikveh. All these are concentrated in the Schulhof itself, in the Schulhof, the Synagogue Courtyard, which is at the very center of the city, the very center of Jewish life in the city of Vilnius. So this is the way that this particular place has got to be viewed. I think the film then, and I must congratulate Loic on the film. I really enjoyed it. It's a great document of our work in the city. I think there are various things that have surprised us along the way of the work. I think in the film, I think you even saw it. I caught the end because I was cut off by this electric storm. But I saw the end of the bit where we found the inscription, and that inscription, which we found, which was a surprise last year, to find an inscription from the synagogue itself, describes the donation of the bima table, of the Torah table, to the synagogue by the sons of Chaim ben Chaim, who is an important character in himself. He makes aliyah to Eretz Israel at the beginning of the end of the 17th, beginning of the 18th century. We've managed to trace him. We've managed to get even to his grave in Jerusalem, and it talks also about his residence in Tiberias and his sons. And the fact, when you start to trace little details like that, you suddenly realize that Chaim ben Chaim was part of the family of the Gaon of Jerusalem. He's an important part of what was called the Lords of Vilna, who were an important part of the rise of the Jewish community later in Jerusalem. What's called the Prushim in Jerusalem, which is a community which still exists till today. And so this is important little pieces of information that the excavation provides us. And I will say, there is one of the criticisms which has been given to has been said about the project is, why on earth do you need to do an archaeological project? After all, we have pictures of this synagogue. We have written descriptions of the synagogue. What's the point of doing an archaeological excavation? Well, exactly that. The finding of an inscription like that is a unique feature of an excavation. The finding of the bima, which we found last year, is something which gives something which is more than a picture. It gives something back to the city. It gives something which is back as part of a memorial of this place. And that memorial is what the excavation provides, that memorial of this great community, which is such a central part of the history of the city of Vilnius. And I really say to all my Lithuanian friends, you cannot understand the history of your own city.
Okay, I think that we're going to move on to Loic. So I'm going to ask to unmute Loic.
Hello, do you hear me? Hello,
yes.
Hello everyone.
Okay, so Loic, it's your task to set up the entire film, which I'm sure everybody has seen, but if you haven't seen the film, you can still see it for another 48 hours. And first, I want to just have you talk about, how did you get involved with this project? Because I know that you worked on 3 other projects with me, but I'm trying to figure out, how did you get to make a movie about the Great Synagogue?
Oh, this is a great story. This is another story inside the story, you know. I want first to thank you everybody, and I want to thank Lynn from the Vilna Schule to speak about this very interesting project. And just a few words before, sorry for my English, I'm French, and so I have some difficulties to speak English, but I think it will be okay for tonight. So because I have, I usually express myself more by visual, more by photography and filmmaker. So, but let's talk about this great project. What I can say is that this project is a non-profit project. It starts from a private fund, and the French Institute in Vilnius, where I'm working, is a producer of this documentary. It was made with the French Institute inside the celebration of the year of the gown in all Lithuania. So why did I do this project? I can say that it had to be done. Someone had to do it, and it was me. So maybe just a possibility. Maybe because I'm French, so I have the possibility to express myself, and I'm not Lithuanian. I'm not Jewish, so I can do it more easy. Maybe it's just a possibility. And everything starts from the day when I met with Richard. It was the first start of this project. I met Richard Freund, and he put me in this idea of making that project alive, because Richard was the first man I met to make this documentary. So I'm very happy that we are now talking together in this event together. So what can I say? What can I say? I feel making this project some kind like a mission. When sometimes you have projects who are bigger than you, and it's so big that you don't even realize what you are doing. And to make this project about the Great Synagogue, it's incredible, because I was in Israel, I was in United States, I make interview in Lithuania, and I met many very interesting and so fantastic people. So it was a gift. It was a gift, maybe from the Great Synagogue to me, to make this project. If we go back in time, in 2018, for people who have watched the film, I'm inside the site of the excavation. I just came after, and I was with my friend, with my dear friend Nicholas. We were together in the site after the excavation in 2018. And Nicholas said to me, I'm sure you are interested about the Great Synagogue. I said, Nicholas. Nicholas is a good friend of mine. And Nicholas, I love this space, I love this site, and I would like to do something. And he said to me, okay, let's do it together. And he helped me with funds to find, and it's all the project start. We were alone in Vilnius after the excavation, and we wanted to know more about the Great Synagogue, because we didn't know nothing about it. And it was, Vilnius is quite of my city now. I'm French, but I'm living in Vilnius for more than 20 years. And the Great Synagogue is part of the history of Vilnius, and it's part of my history too, because I'm living in Vilnius. So we decided to do something that people could understand more what was the Great Synagogue. And it's already started. And I remember I went to the Vilna Gaon Museum, and asked my friend, because they are partner from the French Institute. So we often speak together, we often do project together. And I asked them, how can I contact people from the team of archaeologists who was this year in Vilnius? And they gave me the mail of Richard Freu. And I wrote to him, hello, Mr. Freu, I'm Loic. I would like to make maybe a documentary of the Great Synagogue. And maybe just 2 hours or 3 hours after, I gave an answer. Next week, I will be in Israel. If you want to come with me, we can discuss and to speak about it. So it's all start. Just an email, and hop, let's go to Israel for the first time of me, of course. So I met Richard in Israel. It was a fantastic trip. And he introduced me John, and I met in Israel many other people. So it's all starts, you know, sometimes in the life, the most important thing is to find people. And as Richard often said to me, you are the good person at the good place at the good moment. So it's what it started, this documentary. And
so let me ask you,
yes.
Loic,
yes,
what are your plans for the film? That's what everybody wants to know, because they may not be there at all the different premieres that we're going to be doing. So what's the final plan for you for this film?
I don't know yet, but no, I hope it will. We will do a nice premiere, and we will try also to put on the TV. So it's a goal. So you know, the idea is that more people can watch it. It's as I told, it's a kind of gift. And if I can give this gift to all people to understand how was the Great Synagogue, this is a goal. So this is the most important things, because I know many people should know about the Great Synagogue, not because it was only the Great Synagogue, because it was a symbol of a civilization who now doesn't exist anymore. And to know what was in Vilnius, to know the story of the city, to know the story of the Jewish civilization for more than 500 years, this could help us to understand our world today. I think so, because Vilnius was kind of multiculturalism city with some kinds of freedom to religion, and we have something to learn from this. So if it will be possible, I hope, but I think it will be possible to find on TV. So it is a goal that I have to. And just what I want to say, just a little more about the project, you know, when I start involved in this project to make that film, first of all, as I said, the first thing is to meet people, to meet good people, to start and to do the work. This is the first step. But the second step is to it's that people trust in you. This is the other part of the project, because you can meet people, but if people doesn't trust you, it doesn't work anymore. So this is how it works. I remember, you know, for the excavation, it was the first time for me to be on the site where many people are working around, and they're working, and I was with my camera, I was with my microphone. What can I do? Can I make interview? Can I film? So at the beginning, you know, it was where I am. And more, and especially with John, we find a very nice relationship to work together during the excavation, because we find each other, I think. He trusts in me. He sees that I was not, maybe I can say a good man that want to film something interesting. And the best moment of the excavation, that was we were together on the cellar, under the bima, and we were alone. And I was filming this moment. It was, wow, it was maybe one of my great moments in my life to be here for the discovery. And this how it's work. If we trust people, everything is more easy. And that's what I wanted to say about the documentary, but I want to say something more, because there is other people who are involved in this documentary. You know, I pick up many of my friends to help me, to give me advice. And one of them, I can say there is two who help me a lot. It's Anna Avidan, who before she make many works about the Great Synagogue in Vilnius. So the documentary is quite of prolongation of her work in Lithuania. And I would like also to thank, you know, you show the teaser of the Great Synagogue, and on the teaser you heard very nice music. And this music is from my friend, French composer Pierre Tillois, and she's a fantastic man. and he gave me the right of all his music to put on this project, and it was very, very incredible. And it's, you know, when you are good people and when you ask help from other good people, we all involved together in the project. So I think it's what I wanted to say. And the last thing, it's just if I have 2 minutes, I just want to speak about Rita Glassman, who she's a cantor who you can listen in the documentary. And I met her by coincidence in New York. You know, she's from San Francisco. I am from Vilnius, and we met by coincidence in the same hotel in New York on the same floor. So you see, the Great Synagogue helped me to find people for this documentary.
Okay. Well, beyond the people we're going to be talking about, we want to talk about this part of the panel is about science, because one of the unique things about the work that we've been doing involves geoscience and archaeology. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce my colleague, Harry Joel. And Harry, you can unmute now, yes?
Yep, we're ready to roll.
And Harry, you're going to show a little bit, I think, about with slides, so everybody can get ready to look at their computers, so you can share things as you're talking. So Harry Joel, 25 years, Harry.
Yeah, we worked at a variety of different sites. My background is in the earth sciences. I'm trained as a physical geographer, and for 25 years we've been doing geoarchaeology. And I just wanted to start off with a shot at the Qumran within Israel. And I look here and I see lake deposits from 10 to 12,000 years ago. When I work with archaeologists, they see a significant site at Qumran. So we could go to the next slide. So this is what I bring into these sites. When I look at where the Great Synagogue of Vilna is, it is, to me, is a glacial fluvial deposit, which means these are deposits laid down by the glaciers, of which the Great Synagogue was built up on top of. And we can see the, you know, the photo to the left, which was shown to me, and the photo on the right is what it looks like today. And if we go to the next photo. And this is Phil Reeder, my colleague. We work a lot together on these projects. There's an elementary school here. And when we went there in 2015, after meeting with John and talking about the site, what is beneath the surface? What is here is what was the big question. If we go to the next slide. We use a variety of different tools when we go to sites. This tool that we're using is ground penetrating radar. We use FM radio waves like you get on your radio that you listen to. We put those into the ground and then they come back to the surface and they help us investigate what's below the surface in a non-invasive, non-destructive way. And this is very important for a lot of historical sites, that we do not destroy them when we investigate them. Next one, please. So this is an image of us looking down on this, and what you can consider is in the upper left to the bottom right, we're using time slices to look through the subsurface. And where the orange circle is we'll look a little deeper. Next slide. And what we see here is some straight linear patterns, and some of them are right angles here, and these are not normal. We do not see these in the natural world. So these are human-built features in the subsurface. This just so happens to be the images that we saw on our first trip. And if we go to the next one, this is also where the bema was found, and where the features below the bema were found as well that Loic just talked about. And here we are investigating with students on top of the bema before lifting the material above that. Next one, please. And so part of our job is to investigate these areas that are, presently elementary playgrounds, and for us to target where we're going to do research. And if you went there last year or a year and a half ago, this surface would look very, very different. because because we've excavated a lot as we go through, but a lot of this is working with students. We have had numerous undergraduate students as well as community members join us here, and we're all learning together. If we could have the next slide. And this is an image of, we grab the next one? All right, so when we take a look at the next slide, what you have is, students working together with us as faculty members to take a look at these sites. And then we have the next slide. What we do is we process this data when we're back at our universities. And what I do is I pass off my data to Phil Reeder, and Phil takes a look at that data and produces the maps and put those together. And what we do is we say, if you were going to excavate, these would be the best places to excavate. It's not our job as we're not archaeologists. It's our job to pass along our best guess of these data sets. And we have started to receive significant press coverage since 2015 on this site. This site has resonated around the world multiple times at the Great Synagogue. And I think for all of us involved is why the Great Synagogue, because we've worked at a variety of different sites around the world, but it keeps coming back to the Great Synagogue. And the students are learning here. They're learning to collect data at a variety of these sites. We come back, we process the data, they talk to their friends and families and colleagues, and we present this data to different organizations and different professional conferences around the world. And one of the big things underlying a lot of this is the students that I bring along and students that I work with in a variety of different situations have basically got a paragraph about the Holocaust in their history book, and that's about it. And so when they go to places like Lithuania, it is often very difficult for them to think that, put it all together as we're doing research at these sites, that these are places where hundreds of thousands of people were executed and killed. And they're doing, now I got to work on this in more detail and then talk to their family, and they become the spokespeople for the next generation. And that's what a lot of these students are. So we're using research methods at significant sites such as the Great Synagogue to investigate into the subsurface to help archaeologists better define where they're going to do research. And I'll finish up there.
Okay, so just so you know, those people who couldn't see the slides were up for a very short amount of time, and then the last part of his discussion did not have his slides. But in the next presentation, I know that the professor is controlling his slides himself. So we're going to introduce now Professor and Dean of the Bear Science at Duquesne, Phil Reeder, who's going to talk more about what is the lifeblood of this geoscience and archaeology work that we do, which is after the geophysicists and geoscientists collect the information, the next stage is to put it on a map, and that map is then shared with all the different people that need to have it. And they know that we know, and they know that we know that they know. So those maps provide a living testimony. And in the case of the Holocaust, this is a totally new area for the way that we do archaeology. So with no further ado, Phil Reeder.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. I'm having a technical problem on my end as well, in that my PowerPoint presentation won't open up for some reason. So I'll walk you through it, and hopefully I can get it to open up eventually. As Richard said, I'm the Dean of the Baer School of Natural and Environmental Sciences at Duquesne University. And I've been part of the research group with Richard Freund and Harry Joel and many others for going on 25 years now. And we've worked projects at many different places around the world, including Israel, and including some extensive work over the past few years in Lithuania as well. And what I'm here to talk about is really my segment of the project, which are the maps that I create as part of the project. And I've had a love of maps all my life. As a child, I was fascinated with maps and fascinated, traveling with my family and looking at road maps and trying to figure out where to go and where we've been and how far it is from place to place. So it's kind of been inbred into me, my love of maps. And looking at it more from an academic standpoint, maps are very important components of any research project that involves spatial data. So spatial data is data that is spread some way across the surface of the earth. And of course, the research we do at the Great Synagogue and other places is like that. You can also use then the maps that are created based upon this spatial data as an analysis tool and to make determinations related to the research about how close together things are, how far apart things are, how things might be related to each other that are parts of those maps. So they're important tools for conveying information as well. They can be constructed, when you construct a map, they can be constructed to reflect varying levels of complexity to suit the intended audience. I can make very, very, very complex maps that are only going to be used by scientists, whereas I can make maps that are more simplified to try to show some general concepts about what we're doing and the relationships between the places that we're looking at, more for the general public. So these maps that are constructed can provide new insights into topics really not previously understood. And again, they're really good ways to convey information as well. So here's a map of Lithuania, and depicted on that map are some of the places that we've done research. And what the maps do is they can take people to places that they've really never been before. And what a really good map does is it helps you visualize that place and that location. And then, as I said before, how close together things are, how far apart things might be, how they're related to each other or how they're not related to each other. So it allows the viewer of the map to create a mental picture of that location and what's at that location. And again, then project that mental picture perhaps to other areas, trying to determine relationships or non-relationships between areas of interest in the particular body of research. It also allows you to pull information together, to synthesize that information together so that you can then look at that spatial data in a variety of different ways and then try to come up with something that's meaningful from that information. So I'm going to talk about two projects in the vicinity of the Great Synagogue, in the vicinity of Vilnius, and then end up talking particularly about Vilnius. This is a project that we worked on over the past several years at the Pravinskas prison, which is outside of Vilnius. And this is a really good example of some of the things that I do in terms of constructing maps and constructing diagrams, trying to get bodies of information across. Okay, just give me 1 second, please. Well, this is an animated video. It won't run, unfortunately. I'm sorry. I apologize for that because my slideshow will not open up. So I'm just going to move on. This is another location. And then what you're seeing here at this particular location is on the top, the greenish looking area. That is a modern satellite photograph from Google Earth. But then the bottom portion of the slide in black and white, that is a 1944 air photograph taken by the German Luftwaffe. And there is an archive of these photographs from the Luftwaffe. And one of the things that I've done here in this particular slide is create an overlay and overlaid the 1944 map on the modern map. And then what you're seeing here in this area of the slide in the center bottom, that is 1944. And the dark area around it is a reservoir. This town of Rumsiskas now sits underneath of the Kaunas Reservoir. A dam was built by the Russians to flood the valley, and the town was inundated, and the old town is now underwater. Here's the modern relocated town of Rumsiskas. And this is an animation as well that I'm going to try to get to play. Okay, no luck. Well, I'll explain the animation to you. Basically, we've located 3 locations underneath of the lagoon, underneath of the lake, of important places in the old town of Ransacked. And the locations are the location of the synagogue, the location of the rabbi's house, and the location of the cemetery located under Lake Kaunas. And then here is a static diagram that depicts that. Again, the greenish area is a modern Google Earth satellite photograph. This is the 1944 air photograph superimposed upon it. Here are those different lines that I was talking about. This is where the cemetery was located. This is where the synagogue was located, and this is where the rabbi's house was located. And part of the project was that in the winter, in January, when the lake was frozen, we went out to the lake. We used ground penetrating radar to then try to find locations to plot, collect the coordinates of those locations, to be able to then go back in the summer when there's no ice on the lake, and to have those as targets to do side scanning radar. And then we also had divers look into it as well. And then now we're on to the Great Synagogue. The map on the left is one of the early maps from 2015. So that's the first year we worked at the Great Synagogue. And it depicts some of the basic information about the synagogue and then its relationship to the modern landscape. And the orangish area in the center, that is the elementary school. And then you can see behind the elementary school is the outline right here. That is the outline of the Great Synagogue. And here's the bathhouse at this particular location. So constructing maps and building maps is a process of building them through time. And by building them through time, you can add additional layers of data. So if we go over to the right-hand map, on the right-hand side is a map from 2016. So in 1 year, this is all the additional data that's been added to the map. All the different colors that you see, those are all ground penetrating radar plots. And then with the various circles of different colors, they highlight the areas for the archaeologists to excavate based upon the ground penetrating radar. And this is a screen capture related to drawing a map like that. What's on the left-hand side are all the different layers of data. What's on the right-hand side are those actual layers. There's 109 different layers of data on that particular map. And then by layering that data, and the mapping program that I use allows me to turn layers on and off and create all kinds of different maps related to whatever piece of information that I'm trying to convey. And I saw Lynn pop on. I am unable to load the animations for some reason. Lynn, is there any way that you can take control of the screen and load?
I will do my best. Hold on 1 second. Let's see here.
So yeah, if you could bring up my PowerPoint and then go to slide, I think it's 14. See if, yeah, we'll go down to slide 13. That's 14. Okay, so we'll go with this one. So this is a new animation that I'm working on right now. This is a map of the synagogue before it was destroyed. This is the synagogue and the outline of the synagogue right here. And we're going to zoom in on it. And then I'm going to start pulling layers of data off and adding different layers. You can see the elementary school now in the center. And then now the other map we pulled off. Here's the elementary school. And this is the outline of the synagogue. This is the bathhouse. So we're adding detail to the bathhouse. And then more detail to the bathhouse. And then in a minute, a side view of the bathhouse is going to pop in. And then you have to kind of mentally move that forward over top of the imprint in front of it. And that's the floor plan of the bathhouse. And that's a little symbolism there to show that the bathhouse, the synagogue was destroyed. And then, you know, these are the remains that are left behind now. And then by the hard work of the group and the archaeologists, we're able to uncover history using science. And if you go to the next one, Lynn, please. So then here we are back to these maps again. And one of the things that I've been working on lately is kind of moving away in some respects from static maps. That is maps that you view, and certainly they convey important information. But with the advent of all kinds of different technologies, can become much more virtual in the depiction of materials related to whatever project you're working on, the Great Synagogue. So as I said, I can pull layers of data off of here, and I can do that in an animated fashion and show different phases of the excavation, show different relationships that exist between where the elementary school is and how it's built over top of the synagogue, and then where the bima is, and where did we do the ground penetrating radar, and then how is that related to the features that we're going to recommend excavation take place to unearth those features. And if we could go to the last slide, please. Okay, so this is just a zoom in of the outline of the school again, and that is in orange, and then that's the Great Synagogue and the walls of the Great Synagogue as depicted. And here's the bima in the lower left-hand corner of the synagogue. And then the photograph on the right is from last summer during the excavation, and then the uncovering of that bima. So in closing, I know I'm a geographer by trade and a dean of a science school as well. And I really feel that maps are, I won't say the most important component of a project, but they're really, really important for pulling all that information and then allowing one to convey that information in all kinds of different levels of complexity to all kinds of different audiences, and to be able to show relationships between spatial data, relationships that exist now, relationships that may have existed in the past, and then allow perhaps projection into the future as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Phil. That was fascinating. I'm Lynn Schultz. I am the Director of Outreach and Programs at the Vilna Shul here in Boston, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're going to move into our audience Q&A section. So if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A box, not the chat box, if you are able to, and we will read some of those off. Panelists, especially Loic, John, Harry, and Richard, if you would please unmute and show your video, that would be great. And Richard and John, the first question that's really been asked by a number of people that I'm going to direct at you is, what's the future of this project? What's happening now? What's happening in the future? And what's the ultimate goal? And how is the Lithuanian community and the Lithuanian Jewish community receiving and accepting this project?
Okay, I'm going to defer to John to give us the last word on where things are. You should all know that we were all planning. We had a massive group of people coming for 2020 and during the summer. And of course, the pandemic broke out, and then we have to figure out what our next strategy is. As far as I can tell, we are all committed, meaning everyone up and down the food chain, from Lithuania to the United States to our funders, and of course, John, to continuing the work. And there is an idea that 2023 is the 700th anniversary of Vilnius and Lithuania. So the idea is that hopefully there will be something ready for 2023, and it will be a part of 2023's activities. But John, you could tell us more about what you've heard.
Well, as you noted, Richard, of course, we had to cancel this year's excavation, and that budget, which is always an important part of every excavation, will be transferred to the next season. And I very much hope that in 2021, if COVID-19 will allow us to do so, we will actually be able to go to Lithuania and continue the work. If not, we'll do it in 2022. But anyhow, that's what we're going to be continuing. The idea of this last season was to continue the exposure of the bima and expose the area towards the Aron Kodesh. That had been the original plan for this year. Obviously, that had been put off, and I think that still remains the plan for the coming year. At the moment, we have the resources to continue for at least one more season. On the present resources, and then we'll have to see how we actually continue in the future. That money was provided through money that was through the Goodwill Fund. The Goodwill Fund is part of the Claims Commission that involves
money received by the Jewish community as reparations for lost community property, not for private property, but for community property from the Second World War, from the time of the Holocaust. That was the money that we'd been provided for this excavation at that stage. And of course, various earlier stages were provided by various other funders. So the idea, as I say, was to do that particular part and also to finalize the work on the bathhouse, because in the last few years, we've been talking about the Great Synagogue, but we'd been, one of the important aspects of our work had been about water. I mean, water is an important part of the whole life of the Schulhof, of the synagogue courtyard. So the bathhouse and also the various mikvot, the ritual baths, have been an important part of our excavation in the last few years. We want to also continue that aspect of the work. In the future, the promise has always been from the municipality that the rather beautiful school that's there at the site today, which is no longer active, will be removed, and then we'll be able to excavate below that building. I don't know whether that's going to happen anytime in the near future, but of course, when that does happen, we'll be able to continue the excavation. What in the future will be at the site is a big question. The problem of display of archaeology anywhere is a big problem, but especially in the kind of climate you have in Lithuania. I mean, here in Israel, it's very simple. It's all, there's sun and everything's built of rock. But as soon as you go to Lithuania, we're talking about buildings which are built out of brick. Though that, together with the very severe temperature differences between the winter and the summer, the amount of rain and moisture in the ground means that the possibility of displaying that particular kind of site is very difficult. It's been mostly, you will see anybody who visits Lithuania will visit sites of archaeological sites. For example, the place where was the founding city of Lithuania. You go there and there's just a small hill. There's nothing to see there at all. So only with very full reconstruction is it possible to display archaeology. There will have to be a decision in the future by the municipality, the people of Lithuania, I would say the Jewish community who live in Lithuania, and I would say also by Litvaks who now live outside Lithuania, about how to display the site in the future. That's a big question. You can go anywhere from full reconstruction of the synagogue to display of the archaeology with some sort of roofing. That's what that will have to be at the site in the future, and I very much hope that that will be the kind of discussions which will be happening over the next few years. Maybe not ready for 2023, but certainly something that will be ready in the years to come.
So I want to say one word about the geoscience, because what we are trying to do now, and I think this is really what's very good. The Lithuanians now understand that our non-invasive archaeology that we do is very helpful for them to understand aspects of communities all over Lithuania. You know, there are cemeteries, and there's shuls, and there's synagogues and Beit Midrash, and there's all these different institutions that were active institutions up until the war. Many of them have been destroyed, but they've been destroyed in a way that the remnants of all these different institutions can still be recovered. So in the past 5 years, every time we bring all this equipment to Lithuania, we're not just working on the Great Synagogue. We've worked on 22 different projects, and these 22 different projects allow us to go into a community, get a permit from the municipality, get a permit from the mayor, get a permit from an institution. We've worked in people's houses, in people's businesses, and what it's done is it's given them awareness of how widespread the Jewish community was before the war. I think people have asked, I'm looking at this, a lot of people are very interested in what the relationship is between our projects and the Lithuanians. Well, I have to say the Lithuanian students are the ones that are in the field with our students and the Israelis excavating. And part of this is the way you educate people. You educate them because this is their country. And now we want them to understand their history, to understand it. And I'll just tell a personal story. We had a great student, graduate student, PhD student working with us for many years. And he was interested when we started to discover all these mikvaot inside the bathhouse. Now, a mikvah is a ritual bath. It's very specific. It has specific quantities of water. It has very specific orientation. And there were for men and for women. And he would sit there. Here's a good Lithuanian PhD student in archaeology who would sit there and shake his head and listen. And then he went on the evening news in Lithuania. And I remember sitting watching the evening news where this PhD in archaeology, Lithuanian, started to explain ritual baths at the Great Synagogue. And there was never a moment that I didn't take great pride in this is what this project does. It is helping Lithuanians to understand what's been lost. What's been lost. And I think a lot of people talk about the Holocaust and we talk about the loss of people, the loss of communities. But really, to understand the loss of the civilization requires people to understand what has been lost, what things were there. So this is physical evidence. We like to go to different communities. By the way, just the other day, I had a community send me a question, can you come when you come next year and visit our community? The name of the community happens to be Telz. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Telz Yeshiva was one of these great communities of learning and yeshiva life. And the fact that people in Lithuania are interested in knowing more about the Jews that were in their community, I think is one of the great successes, beyond the fact that we've done great work in Vilnius all throughout the country. And I have to say that this is a country that somehow has figured out a way of accepting what was in the past and what was done and moving forward. And that's that in itself. I mean, John, you can tell me what your idea about, but I see this as an ongoing process of working together with other Lithuanians.
Questions about the elementary school. We're getting a lot of questions about how did they not realize what was under it? Why did they build the school there? Who owns the elementary school now? Did you have any opposition to, obviously the school isn't in session when you're digging underneath it. Is it still being used when excavation isn't live? Questions like that. Can you address those in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think, let me take it back. At the end of the Second World War, the building of the Great Synagogue was still standing. It was gutted, it was burnt, but it was still standing. And in fact, it was repairable at that stage. And from the end of the war to around about 1952, it was a protected site. In 1955, the Lithuanian Soviet government decided to destroy the remains of the Great Synagogue that was still standing, and they demolished it. And they demolished it to a large extent and built upon that, in about 1957, the elementary school. Everybody was aware of the existence of the Great Synagogue at that site. Nobody was not aware of it there. Everybody knew it was there. And the school was built over the top of it. And I think it was said earlier in the film, in the extract we saw about how the bottom part of the film of the synagogue had been preserved by being at a lower level than the school surface at the time. So that school then was running as the main elementary school in the center of Vilnius for many, many years. Just over 3 years ago, that school was closed, and the school it was moved to a new site, and the site was then designated by the municipality, who is the owner of the site at this stage, that they were going to demolish the school within 2 years. In the meantime, that particular promise by the mayor of Vilnius has not been at this time has not been acted upon. And last year, just a few months ago, we were informed that the ownership of the site and the elementary school had been transferred to the Jewish community of Lithuania. That's where it stands today. And they are now the owners of the site, and we'll have to see how the Jewish community, it's a community, we're talking about all of 3,000 people. I mean, that's very, very small in the whole of Lithuania today. About 2,000 Jews living in the city of Vilnius. They now today are the owners of the site, and we'll have to see how they manage the any ideas for memorial at the site in the future, and how they managed also to find the resources to do that particular kind of work at such an important site in the center of the city. Because, as I think I said earlier, I'm not sure, I was sort of cut off with my internet problems, but finding some way to return the symbol of the Great Synagogue to the city of Vilnius is extremely important, because the city is missing a central part of its history. The old city of Vilnius is a World Heritage Site, and it says that the space of the empty space of the Great Synagogue is what represents it. I think that's an outrageous statement. It appears in the UNESCO statement of value for this old city of Vilnius, that the empty space, and I don't think any community of such importance to a city wants to be an empty space. That's not something how we want to view our history. And so that history has to be filled with content. And that's the challenge for the future.
There are lots of questions being asked about what the security is like around the site. Is it being protected? Is there any risk or concern about people damaging it further?
We cover that. We excavate and back cover every season. We don't leave anything open. So we finish our excavation and cover what we excavate. I know that may seem like a pointless activity, but that's the only way you can preserve a site until you actually decide to present it to the public. So until the time arrives when the site will be developed, the way we work is by excavating, back covering, and that back covering protects the site.
You know, one of the strange oddities of this is that because that building is still there, it actually in some way protecting not only the things that are below the actual school itself, where the actual bima was found underneath the principal's office. So, I mean, we're talking about if we didn't have the school to cover everything, a lot of this would be difficult. Plus, I have to say that a lot of the artifacts are kept there. It's a good place for us to work towards getting restoration and lab results about what are there. But the idea of what will be there in the future is also going to depend upon the fact that there has to be security, because this would be not only is it a symbol, it's also a symbol of what other people want to do to make a point. So part of it is we're hoping that when the city makes their plans together with the Jewish community, that they are going to figure out a plan where security will be a priority. One of the reasons why they were thinking about making it into a, quote, museum park, where it would be, all the things would be indestructible, basically indestructible in the museum park, would make that an advantage, but it wouldn't really show you the real artifacts. So finding a place for all the real artifacts is going to be, again, another piece of the puzzle.
So you're speaking of artifacts, and we've had a couple questions about what's actually happening to them. You said right now they're being kept in the school.
First of all, we're talking about small finds, tens of thousands of small finds, and very large objects. They're either buried or they are already in other locations. But that is the problem, is that there is no central place. Like in Israel, there's a place for all these artifacts who come out, and you want to take the artifacts and put them into a secure location where they can be studied properly. But right now, building that type of facility is really way beyond the scope of the project.
Can I just add that most of the most important finds at this stage are kept at the Gaon Museum in Vilna, not at the school. They're kept at the museum. For example, we found this inscription, which is today at the Gon Museum, waiting to be put on display. There are other finds which we found, for example, naming plaques from seats at the synagogue, which have also been found. We found a lot of coins at the excavation. All these things, a button from the Grande Armée of Napoleon's army. All these kind of things are kept at the moment at the Vilna Gaon State Jewish Museum, and the idea is that they, of course, will be, at least at the initial stage, displayed at the Gaon Museum, with the only two other artifacts which come from the synagogue, which are kept at the museum itself, because everything else has been lost. But the only two other artifacts, which are the shield, which came from the top of the Aron Kodesh, and the Amud, which is also displayed at the museum. So those will be displayed there in the meantime, at least.
Dr. Rita, two questions for you. Is your work with Earth analogous performing CT scans on the human body? Like when you're scanning the Earth, is that analogous to what CT is doing when you're in a CT machine?
Actually, I'll transfer that one to Harry. He's better to answer it.
Okay.
All right, yeah, CT scan would use different types of frequencies. So an MRI, similar kind of thing. We're using, in this case, electromagnetic energy. We're using anything from 100 to 900 megahertz and putting that into the ground. And that's reflecting back to the surface. So it's a similar type of software we use, but different types of frequencies.
Amazing. While you're speaking, Harry, we had a couple questions about your background and how did you begin doing this and working on these projects specifically within the Jewish community?
So yeah, I work with Richard, who is a rabbi, as well as a Jewish historian. I myself am not Jewish, but I work in a variety of different areas with very much an interfaith group. We come together to solve problems. We've worked in all kinds of different settings, and I would say our faith doesn't interfere, or our background doesn't interfere in trying to solve those problems. So I would say 25 years ago, when we went into the Judean desert to work on a project, it was a team of people that were brought together to solve the problems at that time, and we have continued to work together, the core of that team since, and we've been, you could say, to Christian sites, you could say Nazareth, you could say, to Muslim sites. We've worked to some of the areas there, and Jewish sites. So depends on where we are and what the problem is. We worked at a variety of different sites worldwide.
Thank you. Phil, there's a couple of people who are asking what other projects you're working on right now.
Well, they're the projects with the group, like we've been discussing, and we have big plans for next summer. I think of a multi-country project to do some work in Poland and in Latvia and in Lithuania on various Holocaust sites. I was introduced to Richard when we were both at the University of Nebraska at Omaha many, many years ago. We met, and the first words out of his mouth to me were, "You know how to map a cave, right?" Because the first project we did in Israel was at the Cave of Letters, and he was looking for someone to map a cave. So my mapping skills go, beyond mapping the surface of the earth and then trying to conceptualize all the data and pull all the different data together. And I think Richard became aware of a project that actually I did in Central America, working on sites associated with the ancient Maya. And Richard became aware that I was working in caves in those areas. So that's where he kind of got the inkling that I had that expertise. And then he found out that I had the expertise to map the surface of the earth, and then he couldn't get rid of me after that. So, we've been working together 25 years now.
So I want to say something, Lynn, about this question about what we're doing next year, because he alluded to it, and I know there are people who are listening that will be very interested in this. We're doing, right now, we have a plan for a 4-country project that involves Poland, Lithuania, Belarus, and Latvia. And we're working on a theme that all the different sites that we have been offered have something to do with the question of Jewish resistance. different forms of Jewish resistance. So in the Warsaw Ghetto, we're going to be talking about a variety of sites in the Warsaw Ghetto that we have already started to map last year. And now we've been given a variety of more sites within the Warsaw Ghetto. And the Warsaw Ghetto Museum is now creating a new museum in Warsaw. And part of their mandate is to locate things below the surface. And of course, in the past 75 years, most of the places of Warsaw have been totally reconstructed. And yet, using this geophysics, using geoscience, we can actually look below the buildings, below the areas, and to recover a lot of the subsurface and the story of what really happened to the Warsaw Ghetto. The other thing is, and I want to say this very clearly, there is a film being made about all these different Jewish resistance sites in one complete project, meaning in the course of 2 to 3 weeks, we will be traveling from Poland. We're going to go from Poland to sites of Jewish resistance in Belarus, sites of Jewish resistance in Lithuania, and then sites of Jewish resistance in Latvia. And the project, called the Resistance Project, is to really change what I think is a paradigm of Holocaust studies that too often does not counter the idea that the Jews went to their deaths like sheep to the slaughter. So this will be a series of presentations, a comprehensive series of places where the Jews did it. And not only did they have armed uprisings, and not only did they have unarmed uprisings, that historical and cultural resistance and spiritual resistance and all the different types of resistance will be featured. Men and women, real people, and the real sites where these things. And what we're going to do is we're also going to see what still remains at these places. Because when we tell the story of the Holocaust, the story has to be a story that reflects not only this idea that the Jews were killed and they were victims, but also the Jews resisted the Nazis and how they resisted. And you can do that through simple location and understanding of what it is that went on at the place. And there is what I call the archaeology of Jewish resistance, which we're hoping we'll be able to do next summer. God wills it. We'll be out in the field with students, with Harry, with Phil, and with the geophysicists from Calgary. And the geophysicists are watching us tonight because they know that we're going to do another one of these in the spring. And I want to also thank the geophysicists, because the geophysicists have brought to the field equipment that has really never been used to locate the kinds of things that we have located. Burial pits that nobody knew where they were. And what's very good about this is it's all non-invasive, meaning it does not destroy the location and allows us to go back at another time and figure out ways to define and know the parameters of all these different sites. And I think that's one of the great contributions of this project in Lithuania. And I want to thank you, Lynn, for being a big supporter, because over the years, the Vilna Shul has invited us and invited the Consul General and invited people to talk about these projects in the Vilna Shul itself. And that is a great testament. Those people who began in 1919, and still there's much to know about Vilna.
The last question before we close, and I know there are so many questions. I want to thank everyone for asking them, but we could be here for many, many hours if we went through them all. But there are lots of people asking how they can help. And I think it's important to note that there's a couple different projects they are talking about. There is the film project that Loic is working on. How can they help with that? There is the excavation project that you are all working on. And then there's also the idea of what's happening to the artifacts and where they go, and the idea for a museum in the future, or a tour of the site or something like that. So how can people contribute? How can they support? What can they do?
Well, first of all, if people are interested in coming to Excavate, they can either contact me or they can contact John. I'm happy to take students. We've taken students from many different universities to do this. I think the hands-on education of getting students out to the field is probably the single most important experience for undergraduates. The second thing is, I think we are pretty clear that the funding issue is a big deal. So John has a site. You can, John, you can tell us the exact link that they can look for to make donations to the site. And if you're interested in anything else, in any of the other projects we're working on, you can contact me here, richard.freund@cnu.edu. So John, could you tell us a little bit about the funding issues for Vilnius?
Yes, obviously funding is always a problem, so that's always something we welcome. That's the basis for all of our work. And in this case, as Richard noted, it's also there are also a possibility to participate in the excavation itself every year. We've had participants really from all over the world, and that was the idea for this summer, and I very much hope it will continue in the future. If you go into Google and you put in Vilna Synagogue, you're very likely to hit one of two places: a synagogue in Boston or a synagogue in Vilna. And that, so if you go to Vilna Synagogue, you will find, I think, on the very first or second one after Wikipedia, you'll find the site of the excavation where we're working at the moment. And also on Facebook, we also have a page which is updated frequently. For example, we have events like this event this evening, and a event which is happening in Johannesburg, which is also a web event, which is also going to be talking about the synagogue excavation. So all these things are on Facebook. Again, if you write Vilna Great Synagogue, I'm sure it will hit almost immediately on those particular two sites. On the website, we also have a page which deals with the with issues of funding. There is a possibility to pay through PayPal, but I would request that you try and use that, but actually contact me, and we'll find a way to actually work through the issue of donations.
And Loic, what about your film? What do you need? What do you want people to send? Oh yeah, Loic, you need people to send you photographs.
Just one other issue, but one last issue before Loic. We also have an office in New York, and the money is charity recognized, so we don't have to pay tax. There we are. Sorry, Loic.
Yes, for the movie, we are looking for all pictures, photos. It could be possible to find about all the Schultz, all the Jewish life in Vilnius, because now with John and with Vladimir, we try to recreate the model, the 3D model of all the Schultz. And we are still always lack of photography, because most of the photo we have, it's always the same point of view, the same photo are very similar. So sometimes we have question about what there was behind this building, what there was behind this one. And so all people who can have idea where to find pictures, all people who have maybe not very picture were not so interesting in, but they could help us a lot to make this 3D model live. So it could be very interesting for us to get more pictures.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. We'll send up a follow-up email with the link to this recording. It will be uploaded within the next few days. If you are just dying to watch it again, you can go to the Vilna Show Facebook page. It was streaming live there, so you can instantly rewatch it there. But we will send out the YouTube edited link later this week, as well as all the URLs that people were talking about. Loic is going to leave the film up for a little bit longer. You are all emailed it to you in your confirmation email, and we will send it out again. But please watch it. It's not going to exist in perpetuity on the YouTube site, because Loic is continuing to edit it, and he needs to finish it, and he wants to premiere it next year. So it won't exist forever. We ask that you watch it within the next 48 hours, and then it will come down. I do want to thank, again, Old Dominion University's Institute for Jewish Studies and Interfaith Understanding, the United Jewish Community of the Virginia Peninsula, the Virginia Holocaust Museum in Richmond, and the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center for helping to make this possible, and to all of you who are joining us and who contributed to the Vilna to help make this possible. So thank you to Phil and John and Richard and Loic and Harry, and we look forward to having another conversation in 2021. Everyone stay safe and healthy and happy. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, good night.
Thank